Guards hauled the starving kitchen girl the length of a grand hall, her bare soles scraping against centuries-old stone. A bruise, fresh, vivid purple, spread across her jaw. She did not cry, she did not flinch. Ringed by sneering alpha lords, this beaten, discarded creature lifted her gaze to the deadliest predator in the 5 territories. Then she held out a torn piece of coarse bread, half-eaten. "You look hungry," she whispered. And for the first time in 300 years of cursed frozen silence, the Alpha King's wolf cracked open a single eye. Before that moment, the royal procession had been a spectacle of wasted wealth. They came draped in silk and silver. His face carried the hollow stillness of a winter tomb. Lady Cordelia of the Northern Ridge presented a sword, its blade forged in dragonfire, its hilt wrapped in the pale hide of a white wolf. She dropped to her knees, offering it with both hands. Her voice rang steady, thick with reverence. __quote_1__, she declared. He lifted one finger from the carved armrest. Halvard, the battle-scarred beater who towered beside the throne, stepped forward and collected the weapon on his lord's behalf. The king never touched it. For 3 days now, 47 women drawn from the most powerful packs across the realm had arrived in succession, each one handpicked by her alpha father. Each one competing for the single position every she-wolf in the kingdom craved. Luna to the Alpha King, Queen of Wolves, mate to the most dangerous creature walking the earth. Cale Thornvein, Alpha King of the Iron Sovereignty, High Lord of the 5 territories, the wolf who had not known a smile in 3 centuries, sat upon his throne of black carved stone and felt nothing. Not boredom, not irritation, not even the stale weight of obligation. Absolute emptiness. The curse had consumed everything else long ago. It started with warmth, sunlight on skin, the amber glow of a hearth, the tight comfort of a fur cloak against the cold. Then taste dissolved. After that, color began to drain. The world bled into a flat wasteland of grays and iron, somewhere around his 2nd century. The affliction burrowed deeper still, gnawing at whatever remained of his ability to feel. Joy vanished first. Grief followed close behind. Anger, the last sharp thing left to him, eventually crumbled. Now a vast frozen quiet fills a space where a soul should have lived. His wolf, once a raging storm inside his chest, had gone silent decades ago. It still existed. He could sense it, the way one senses a limb gone entirely numb. But it no longer spoke, no longer surged, no longer cared. 300 years on this throne, 300 years of unbroken ice. The 48th woman stepped forward now, another noble's daughter wrapped in emerald velvet, and Kaylee's gaze had already drifted to the window behind his throne. Grey sky pressed against grey stone. The world beyond mirrored the wasteland inside him. Then violence cracked through the silence at the back of the hall. The crowd near the entrance shifted. A ripple of murmurs cut through the grand hall. Not the hushed reverence that greeted each noble's presentation. Something rougher, uglier. A sharp voice, the unmistakable crack of someone shoved hard. Kaylee's eyes moved toward the rear, not from concern, because movement registered, and even a king buried in ice noticed disruption. She was small, that registered first. Small and thin, wearing a dress washed so many times its original color was anyone's guess. Dark hair yanked back in a braid already half undone. That fresh bruise blooming purple along her jaw. She made no effort to hide it. 2 guards gripped her arms. Behind her stood a thick-necked lord, Lord Maron of the Ashwood Pack, a face Cale placed only dimly. Lord Maron jabbed a finger toward the exit, contempt rolling off him in waves. __quote_2__, Lord Maron spat, his voice cutting clean to the front rows. Release her. My king? You look hungry, mate. Mate, what is your name? Elowin, I am no one's daughter. I belong to no pack. I came because I was hungry too. Lord Merrin surged forward, face twisted with fury. Your Majesty, he spat. This creature is an Omega, lower than an Omega.
She was cast out of the Ashwood pack for Halvard. Kalle's voice dropped to a register that made the torches on the walls gutter. If Lord Maron speaks again without my permission, remove his tongue. The silence that followed wasn't reverence. It was raw, animal fear. Kalle descended the throne steps. He had not descended them for a single one of the 47 noble daughters, had not risen from his seat once during the entire 3-day procession. Every wolf in the chamber understood the weight of what was unfolding before them. Every wolf in that chamber locked rigid with fear. He stopped directly before Elowin. The top of her head barely grazed his chest. This close, the bruise along her jaw told a darker story than distance had allowed. Layered purple and yellow, the signature of repeated strikes, not one unlucky blow. Her hands were rough with calluses, her wrists thin as kindling. She carried wood smoke and wild thyme on her skin. And beneath those scents, something else. Something that drove his wolf slamming against his ribcage so hard he thought bone would splinter. You will stay, he said. Not a plea, not quite a command. Something cracked open between the two, raw need with nowhere to hide. Elowin tilted her face upward. The gold burning in his eyes had already begun to flicker, warmth retreating like a flame losing its air. She felt it beneath that single point of heat. Cold. Vast, fathomless cold, stretching down into him like a well with no bottom. I have nowhere else to go, she said quietly. But I will not be kept. One corner of his mouth shifted, not a smile. The ghost of a memory where smiles used to live. Then stay because you choose to. She held his gaze. Seconds passed. Then a single nod, sharp and final. Behind them, buried in the watching crowd, Lady Seraphina's fingers tightened on her chair's armrest until the wood groaned beneath her grip. Beside her sat an older woman, draped in black. Vespera, former advisor to the king's late mother, and arguably the most powerful female wolf at court. Her expression betrayed no surprise, only calculation, cold and patient. They gave Elowin a chamber in the East Tower, sparse but clean. A narrow bed, a hearth, a window overlooking the inner courtyard where warriors trained at first light. It was the finest room she had ever stood inside. She remained at its center for a long while, listening to wind cry against ancient stone, trying to make sense of what had just happened to her life. She knew about mate bonds. Every wolf did, even the outcasts, even the ones raised in kitchen corners, sleeping on cold floors. The bond was sacred, involuntary. The wolf recognized its match before the mind could catch up. But Elowin had never shifted, not once. Her entire life, she'd been told she was defective, too weak, too small, too broken to carry the wolf that should have lived inside her. Lord Maron had wielded that belief like a weapon to justify everything. The beatings, the starvation, years of invisible labor with no status, no protection, no name worth remembering. If she had no wolf, how could a bond have formed at all? She pressed her palm flat against her chest. Something had stirred there when his fingers brushed hers, a flutter like a second heartbeat. Quick, fierce, desperately warm. A knock at the door. She opened it, expecting a guard. Instead, a small, round-faced woman with gentle eyes and flour dusted across her apron stood in the corridor. "I'm Marta," I managed the kitchens, brought you something to eat, and I wanted to tell you before someone else does. The last woman who caught the king's attention was Lady Thessaly. Beautiful, ambitious.
She told everyone she'd be Luna within the month. What happened to her? Vanished 3 months ago. Vespera claimed she left on her own, but her belongings never moved from her room. Her horse never left the stable. Be careful who you trust inside these walls. Not everyone who smiles wants you breathing. You can read, a healer taught me when I was 7. Lord Maron had her whipped for wasting time on an omega. She kept teaching me after that, just in secret. What are you reading? A history of the Bloodfrost curse, a fascinating subject, especially the chapter on how it was cast. 312 years ago, a witch named Morwen cursed the Alpha King's bloodline after his father executed her daughter for unsanctioned magic. The curse was designed to consume him in stages. First warmth, then sensation, then emotion, then his wolf. And finally, his life. It required a living anchor, someone close to the king, feeding the curse with their own vitality. She closed the book. Someone inside this fortress has been keeping you in a state of slow decay, Your Majesty.
For 3 centuries.
The fire crackled. A log split apart in a burst of sparks, and the sudden flare caught gold surging back into Cale Thornvane's eyes. You found this in 3 days, he said. Wonder threaded through his voice, thin, fragile, the curse leaving him too hollow to hold it fully. I found it because I searched. Has no one else? The question hung like a stone dropped into a well with no bottom, because the answer, the one he had never allowed himself to face, was no. No one had searched. Not Halvard, whose loyalty was absolute but whose mind never wandered past orders. Not his advisors, who treated the curse like a chronic illness, manageable, never curable. Not Vespera, who had served 3 generations of the Thornvane line and who surely, certainly,
Must have. He stopped. Eloin watched understanding break across his face like dawn splitting a dark horizon. She said nothing. She waited, the way you wait for someone teetering at the edge of a truth they've spent years walking circles around. Vespera, he said. She has served this court for 300 years, Eloin replied, each word placed with care. Since before the curse, since before Morwen. She was your mother's closest confidant, and your grandmother's before that. That alone proves nothing, but when Lady Thessaly began drawing close to you, she vanished. Eloin's voice held firm. Marta told me. And tonight, when I asked Marta who had assigned this room, this exact chamber in the East Tower, cut off from the rest of the court, she said one name.
Vespera.
The cold inside Cale Thornvane's chest clenched like a fist closing around bone. Not the numbness of the curse, something worse. Something that felt terribly, unmistakably, like the first stirrings of fear. Why are you telling me this? Eloin rose to her feet, still so small, still barely reaching his chest, but there was nothing small about the force behind her eyes. Because you accepted my bread, she said, and because I believe you have been starving for a very long time, and no one in this fortress has cared enough to ask why. He closed the distance in 2 strides, not threatening, desperate. He stood near enough that the unnatural cold pouring off his skin pressed against her like a living thing. Near enough that his breath should have warmed her forehead. It didn't. His hand lifted, shaking, genuinely shaking, and hovered a finger's width from her jaw. If I touch you, he rasped, his voice destroyed, barely a whisper. The warmth comes back.
But it retreats again, and every time it retreats, the cold cuts deeper. The curse is fighting it. Eloin reached up, took his hand, pressed it to her cheek,
Warmth crashed through him like a dam giving way. Not just heat, sensation, texture, the impossible softness of her skin, the hummingbird quick pulse beneath his fingertips, wild thyme and wood smoke flooding his senses so sharply it stung his eyes with tears. Then we'll have to move faster than the curse. I invoke the right of challenge, for the protection of this pack and this throne. The woman called Eluin is wolfless, packless, without name or lineage. She is unfit to stand in this court, much less beside the king. I challenge her claim. I accept. You cannot. A challenge means a fight. She is a ranked wolf. She will... I accept. Dawn tomorrow, the fighting circle, before the full pack. She is the anchor. _quote_5 6 _ I am certain. 3 centuries she has fed the curse. Kept you frozen. Kept you controllable. Any woman who might have broken through, she made sure they never survived long enough. Then let me destroy her. I am the Alpha King. I do not need a challenge to... If you kill her by force, without proof, the pack shatters. Half your lords pledged loyalty to her before they ever pledged it to you. She built those bonds deliberately over centuries. She must be unmasked publicly, in a way no one can deny. And you think a fight accomplishes that? I believe that when she tries to turn the curse on me inside that circle, every wolf present will see exactly what she is. And if she kills you first, then you will know the truth, and you will finish it. For 300 years, I have felt nothing. I cannot lose the first soul who made me feel again. You will not lose me. I did not walk into this fortress to die. I came because I was starving, and your hunger was greater than anything I had ever seen. The Omega cannot even shift. This will be over in seconds. She is a Solaris wolf. I thought that bloodline was gone. So did Vespera. 300 years. For 300 years you kept me frozen. You killed Cecily. You fed the curse that took my father. You let my mother believe it was a flaw in her blood. Your mother was weak. Your father was weak. This kingdom needed iron rule, not feeling. I held this pack together while you sat on your throne and called paralysis power. You locked me in a cage and called it a crown. Eluin. Luna of the Iron Sovereignty, my mate, my equal. The woman who fed a starving king and shattered chains the world called permanent. Rise, kings do not kneel. This one does, for you. Always and only for you. A letter arrived from Ashwood. Lord Merron, his son. Merron has been deposed by his own pack council. It seems tyranny loses its charm when the neighboring realm offers a different way of ruling. The son is requesting a trade alliance. He's enclosed a personal missive, addressed to me. She held the letter up. Cale could tell even from where he sat that the parchment was expensive. The seal pressed deep into the wax. He offers an apology, Eluin said, on behalf of his house, for the mistreatment of an honored wolf who should have been recognized.
Protected. Do you wish? Eluin smiled. That smile. The one that still quieted his wolf mid-breath. The one that flooded his chest with something too vast to name. Not after 300 years without words for warmth, for joy, for the singular ache of loving someone so entirely that the world bent itself around her. No, she said. I want to frame it. Hang it in the grand hall, right beside the piece of bread. He stared at her. You kept the bread. I found it in your desk drawer, 3 days after I arrived.
Wrapped in cloth, her voice softened. The only gift out of 48 that you had touched with your own hands. Cale pulled her closer. Sunset poured gold across them both, and below, the gardens bloomed thick and wild. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Not grief, not mourning. Pure, undiluted joy. The sound of a creature alive in a world that had finally, after 3 centuries of winter, remembered what spring felt like. "It was the only one worth keeping," he said. And the Luna of the Iron Sovereignty, who had once been no one's daughter, who had walked into a king's fortress with empty hands and a heart that refused to be empty, pressed her face against his chest, listening to the heartbeat she had rekindled with a crust of bread and the blazing, unshakable refusal to believe that a frozen thing could not be warmed.